Don't be scared of AI. Don't be scared of this. Just know what to look for, and it's the data mode, the usage mode. Usage equals data. The big debate here is around whether the Adobe suite is going to be disrupted by all the new AI tools. And it's the same old, right, the same narrative. But with Adobe, it's a little bit more complicated because I think both sides are missing a little something here. Right, first off, the Wall Street narrative, I mean, we've already debunked that. That one, they're just not even looking at the data. They're not even paying attention to any of the real stuff. They're just completely fear mongering and just whatever, ignore it. But then on the retail end, I think people are not really focused. I mean, the retail, they understand with the data stuff. They understand that Adobe's products, I mean, first of all, they already have Firefly. They already have generative AI. And then they have all the data, so they're probably going to be able to make the best creative AI. Yeah, I mean, people are going to stay on Adobe. They're going to stay with the workflow that they're used to. Remember, customer lock-in. And I agree with that. But the thing that I think they're missing is the revenue streams. That's why I spent so long on those Mag 7 revenue streams. Revenue streams are extremely, extremely important. Because do understand, everybody's a little bit right, a little bit wrong. Me too, right? Everybody got something right, something wrong. And the thing about the disruption narrative is that it's not totally baseless, right? There is going to be stuff that gets disrupted. I mean, we're already seeing all types of disruption already. We broke down the stuff with Google. Duolingo is opening up school on your phone. Right? That's a whole new thing going on. And then all the stuff that people are really focused on, ServiceNow, Salesforce, agentic AI for business, and enterprise agentic AI. That's like replacing the majority of office jobs, right? Look, that's like a massive amount of disruption. So it's just really important. There is going to be massive disruption. You just got to pay attention to where it is. And the way to see it is within the revenue streams. How do these companies make their money? Because this is a very similar situation to Google. Adobe is a very similar situation to Google where you can both win in AI and also lose in revenue. That's a big thing. You can be a massive winner of AI in your field, but you're eating your own revenue stream. We saw it with Google. Being a winning AI model eats away your existing revenue stream of Google search. That's what it does. You have to they balance each other out. You're losing search and gaining in large language models. And of course, when you're balancing that, what does that mean? That means you're not just straight up growing. If you have to compensate for a loss, that means the money is just not straight up growth, right? And that's the most important thing to understand about Adobe as well. They're going to be the creative cloud winner of AI, right? They're going to make the best generative AI, the best agentic AI, the best whatever art kind of AI. They're going to make the best one. And I agree with that. And I agree that their enterprise contracts are going to be locked in. And their enterprise contracts make up most of their revenue. So yeah, very cool, right? It's seat-based. That's the main thing. When we're looking at AI, you gotta look at the business model. Because the one narrative that Wall Street has right is that the seat-based model is getting disrupted. Because what are seats based on? What is a seat-based model? Seat-based model is a big company subscribes to you based on how many workers they employ. Because all these workers need one of your products, right? So you hire 1,000 people, they're all using Photoshop or Editor or whatever else. It's 1,000 seats worth of contracts, right? But what are we talking about here? We're talking about agentic AI. We're seeing the layoffs already. They're wiping the workforce, right, in exchange for these agentic AI. If your revenue is built on seats, it doesn't matter if you're the winning agentic AI, your majority revenue comes down. Just like Google, your majority revenue starts to come down, and that means that you need to double grow or double increase the margin on your agentic and generative AIs. And I agree with the data lock-in and everything. The enterprise contracts don't want to switch off Adobe. I understand that all the marketing information, all the clouds are integrated. Valid. Very, very valid. I don't think anyone's switching off Adobe. Besides the consumer, right? The average consumer, individual creator, nobody's using Adobe. That's going to be way, way too expensive. But as Adobe Bulls always say, we don't care about the average consumer. So fine. Your enterprise clients are going to be paying less money. That's just how it is. And the only way to compensate for that is to just triple, quadruple upcharge Firefly and whatever agentic products you come up with. Now, I will say Firefly is token based, and then whatever AI model that comes out, those are all going to be token based for pretty much all companies because that's just, I mean, AI costs a lot to run, so it has to be token based or you can't run it. But either way, it's this product is replacing the majority of your revenue, right? This product is replacing the majority of your revenue of what you're built on. They're firing their workforce. They're keeping you, but they're firing their workforce. Adobe's revenue is based on the workforce. There's nothing you can do about that besides triple scam, and that's where we run into the issue. There's a tipping point. There's a tipping point where companies like, man, you can't be charging this much. You can't be charging me this much. When, guess what? You know who's making the other generative AI products? Reputable companies. It's not startups we're competing against. We are not competing against startups. So that's the other thing we have to get into. Adobe's competition is not just Canva, CapCut. No. Nano Banana's Google. Google's got a guy, OpenAI. I'm sure Adobe's still the best. But you have to be so much better than all these big guys. Don't forget these are big guys. OpenAI and Google, they're all big guys. They don't have the data that you do. They don't have the data that Adobe does. But they have the pricing power because Adobe is forced to triple up charge. You get me? So that's just the most important thing to understand about Adobe. I believe that they are still the top creative AI. I do believe that. And they're going to stay locked into the enterprise clients, but it cooks your revenue. That's what it does. We're looking at money here, stocks, right? Like, we're not just looking at the product. We're also looking at the money they bring in, the revenue. Because don't forget, what are the stocks moving on? What do the stock prices keep moving on? They move on the revenue growth. Can you keep on putting up your earnings? Can you keep on putting up your revenue? That's the more important thing. That's more important than winning the space. I'm trying to make that clear about Google too, because Google might actually be the leader of AI right now. They might be. Doesn't matter. You got to overcompensate for the loss to search, just like Adobe's got to compensate for the loss to seat-based revenue. Very, very tough. And now, when we take a look at Adobe's revenue, here's where we get a little bit of the mix, right? Because it's sold off very hard, but the revenue is about the same. They're still putting up 10%, double digits, right? They're doing pretty good. So the sell-off in the numbers is pretty much baseless. So that is why I do say in the Discord that Adobe could very much have a Google situation, where the money, it just doesn't show up in the money. Like, eventually it gets to a point where, like, ChatGPT disruption. Obviously, with Google, I mentioned already. It's because Sam literally just started putting up ads in his thing. Now is when we're going to see it, all right, over the course of this year and the next year. That's the problem. But for Adobe, if the same thing could very well happen where they just 10% again, another 10%, a couple more quarters of 10%. Like, I still see the bearishness happening, but it takes a long time for that to happen. It's a slow drop off. It's not gonna show up in the numbers very soon, I don't think. But if they just keep putting up 10%, and then also when software V's right back up, when people snap back to their senses, when the software sectors V's back up, Adobe could very well double V up, all right? But of course, that only works if they can keep up the 10%. And of course, I'm not so confident that they can, but I just don't think it hits very soon. And now in terms of their earnings, here's the real thing with Adobe is that if there really isn't much disruption to Adobe at all, even with the stuff that I'm saying, with the seat-based revenue, although I think that's a big problem, but if it ends up not being a problem, this sell-off is ridiculous because look at their margin profile. 90% margins. What are we talking about? Not, everything's everything's profit. Everything's profit through the door. 90% gross, 30% net. If there's no disruption, this is a phenomenal company that will just keep on growing and growing profits. So, 15 times earnings. That's what we're talking about. But that's the risk you have to take. If you think that there's no disruption, then 15 times earnings for this kind of company is just absolutely ridiculous. But of course, if there is some kind of disruption, whether Wall Street's right and they get actually disrupted, which I think is unlikely, or if I'm right and the revenue, it's not that they get disrupted, but there's a transition period where you transition into that token model. It's still a big hit to your revenue. That's a couple years where you're going to be not feeling so good. Then this price to earnings might actually just reflect the EPS decline. It's likely a temporary decline, but it's a decline nonetheless. So Adobe, I should have put that over here. Adobe, where does this go for me? It's a hold. It's a wait, not a hold for me. A hold / wait. For me, it's a wait. I don't really want to touch it. I hope very much that the bulls get their Google situation, but I'm not messing with it. Like I said, some things do get disrupted. The reason I'm a little concerned with Adobe is because coding was the testing ground for the large language models and generating like text and that kind of stuff, being smart like that. Creative design is the testing ground for generative AI. So if there's anything that has a target on its back, it's Adobe and its entire market. That has a massive target on its back. So for me personally, I'll be staying away from Adobe. No thanks.
No thank you.
All right, now the next 3 or 4 on the list, I'm putting into this one group because this is the main AI software that people are getting into right now. Outside of Adobe, outside of Duolingo, the main softwares that people are getting into are the agentic AI business automation, the enterprise automation. That's really what it is. This is the big category people are talking about, right? It's Salesforce, ServiceNow. Well, Adobe's part of it, but Salesforce, ServiceNow, HubSpot, UiPath, Zeta, and there's a couple others. But those are the main ones that I've been hearing about. Now, essentially, all of these companies, they kind of do the same thing. It's AI automation for your business. But if you know anything about business, there's just a lot of different departments and workflows within a business that can be automated. Your sales, your marketing, your finance, HR, other internal operations. There's just so much that goes into a business and so many different people you got to hire. And of course, as we've been seeing with the layoffs, well, they're being replaced by AI. All of these jobs, it's all bureaucratic type jobs, right? It's just paper pushing. It's essentially paper pushing, clicking some keys. But all of these jobs are now being automated by AI. Anything that isn't a creative job. I've been saying that if you're not a creative, you're getting wiped out. That's just what happens. The generative AI does it better. And that's why we're seeing the mass layoffs. Because you really only need 1 or 2 guys. 1 to 5 guys, you could run the full department. You can run the full 1,000-person department with just a couple guys. Or girls. And that's exactly what's happening. And that's why we have all of these stocks in question now. So for my list, I went with Salesforce, CRM, ServiceNow, Zeta, and then Fiverr, which that might seem like a weird pick, but we're going to get to it. But overall, with these 4, it shows my exact outlook for how this agentic business automation is going to play out. Now, when it comes to the AI business automation space, it goes back to the same stuff that I've been saying about the data. It's just who holds the data? Who holds the customer data? As always, that's what you got to watch. If you want to know who wins in AI, first of all, make sure that they're actually doing AI, right? That's easy. They have a conference call every single quarter, so you know if they're doing AI or not. They'll tell you. So just first of all, just make sure everybody's doing AI, which on this list, everybody's doing AI. After that, it's what I keep saying. You look for the data. Who is integrated? And I'm talking, when I say integrated, you have to understand how clouds work. You are tied in. Your business is tied into this cloud. So you got to look at who's integrated in this space, who has the customer data. And that's what you got to do when you're looking for a moat and you're looking for a competitive edge, okay? You look at the market. You got to look at the total addressable market. You got to look at where the customers are. where they are locked into, who has their attention, and then for tech specifically, who has their data. And of course, when I say data, I mean like daily data. The way Duolingo has that daily data, daily student data, that's what I'm talking about. Or Adobe too. Adobe with their daily user flow on their cloud, that's daily data. Okay, you get a constant update. It's think about it as a constant flow of training for your AI. So that's what we got to focus on here. Customers and data, customers and data. And that's really why I'm starting off with Salesforce and ServiceNow, because that's the data. That's who has the customer's data. It's these guys. The main concern for Salesforce and ServiceNow is the main one that I'm talking about, how either a startup is going to disrupt them, or Anthropic, the foundational base models are gonna disrupt them. Now, of course, I've already went over that. They don't have the data. They don't have the customer's data. All the big enterprise clients, the Fortune 500s, are built on Salesforce's cloud. And then they're also built on ServiceNow. So they do two different things, just to be clear. Like I said, business automation has a whole bunch of different things. So there's going to be different types of cloud. Adobe does marketing and creative. Salesforce does a little bit of marketing, but it's, your sales, your CRM. That's what they do. And then ServiceNow is HR automation, back-end internal operations. All the clients are built out. When I say built out, I mean, I'm telling you, their whole business is connected to Salesforce. It costs a lot to switch off of that. It's the equivalent of switching off of your data center. Like, your whole system is built on this one thing. And that's the main thing to understand about why the disruption narrative for specifically these guys just makes really no sense. Because I'm not saying that you wouldn't switch off of it. I'm just saying it's a lot of hassle. And if they are coming to you, if Salesforce and ServiceNow are coming to you going, hey, we're developing AI as well, then you're going to go, okay, well, I'm not going to go switch to some startup. There's no need. There's no need, because next year they have me. They've got me covered. And of course, like I keep saying, more than they got you covered. It's more than they got you covered. They already know you. They know your data. Their system knows your data. But there's just really, really no way that these big companies are going to be switching onto... They're not going to be switching onto a startup or another model unless, like, that model has to be, like, so much better. Like, leagues better than Salesforce and ServiceNow, okay? Because the switching costs to get off of Salesforce and get off of ServiceNow, switch onto another cloud, switch on maybe another data center build. It's like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it if there's only a slight difference. And like I keep saying, we're all built on the same tech. We are built on the same technology. And then if there is a difference in the technology, the companies with the advantage are Salesforce and ServiceNow, not the startups. And that is really why I'm seeing both of these companies, Salesforce and ServiceNow, as massive winners very soon, because we're already seeing the signs. The workforce is being laid off. They're being laid off. They're being laid off in mass. And where do you think the money's going to? It's going to these companies. Specifically these companies. I'm not talking... It's not spreading out randomly. It's going to Salesforce and ServiceNow's AI. That's just... The people who are getting laid off, the exact jobs, the exact AI that are replacing these jobs are from those guys. So yes, I see these companies doing very well in the coming years. But what I will say specifically about Salesforce specifically, just watch out for the same exact thing that I said about Adobe. Because Salesforce is also seat-based revenue. They also work on seat-based revenue. Your sales team, it's their current subscription base is based on how many salesmen you got, how many marketers you got, or how many different customer service reps you got. So as they make products to replace that, their seat-based revenue goes down. The difference is that CRM just got way more. They got way more product suites and way more different things they can offer to upcharge compared to Adobe. And not to mention that it's the big businesses. They're willing to pay They're willing to be squeezed. They don't mind because they they can direct. The big thing about business to understand is that you can directly see the ROI on Salesforce. You can do in the numbers, in the quarterly numbers, you can directly see your ROI from Salesforce compared to Adobe. Adobe's a little more shaky because it's tied to your marketing. So you can't directly see the ROI from that compared to your business automation. It's like, oh, I saved X amount of money this year. Like I made this much more money because of Salesforce. I'm willing to pay that much out of my profits, like that much more out of my profits. That's the leverage that Salesforce has compared to Adobe. But that is something to watch because, like I said, ServiceNow is also a big winner, but they don't operate like that. ServiceNow is like they do this. They've been doing this. They don't have a cloud based they don't have a seat based revenue. Their whole thing, even before this whole AI situation, their whole thing is we automate your business. We replace we replace the rot, the stuff that you don't need, the mess. So of course, when it comes to AI, ServiceNow only gets better. They only their revenue only increases because their revenue is based on, well, it's more based on a cloud subscription. It's based on cloud subscriptions, not based on seats. Like it's a usage based model and like how many different products you use. And of course, as ServiceNow's agentic AI gets better and companies start wiping out more of their workforce, ServiceNow revenue only grows. So if we're talking about the biggest winner, or I don't know about the biggest because Salesforce just has a bigger customer base, I think, but ServiceNow would be the least controversial winner in terms of not eating their own revenue, not eating their old revenue stream. Because at the end of the day, Salesforce is still dealing with that, compensating for that growth. They have to compensate for the loss of their seat-based revenue, which I think they'll have no problem doing, but it's an issue. And now, in terms of the revenue, the reason why Salesforce has kind of been falling off the cliff recently, like not just because of the SaaS, but it's another company that's been kind of underperforming. The stock has been underperforming, but it's mostly because if you think about what they do, like a business cloud, they should be putting up more than single digits, and that's really probably that's been an issue for Salesforce for a while now. Of course, I think now they're ramping up, but really, this kind of shows that I guess they were a little bit slow on this AI adoption. Again, this isn't bad. They're still growing the top line, but this is what really is extra contributing to the stock's decline. But like I said, the data. Who's got the data? It's these guys. But like when we compare it to ServiceNow, they've been growing 20%. That's something that's what you're looking for when wow. Oh my god. Yo. Guys, look at the performance. They've done wow. They have a really, really, really strong growth. But this is what I'm talking about with SaaS companies. SaaS companies do this. You're telling me they've grown over 20% revenue for over 20 years. They've been growing at over 20% top line for 20 years, and now we're getting an AI boom? What are we talking about here? What are we talking about here? But I'm telling you, this is what we're looking at when it comes to software companies. SaaS companies, they grow like this. Decades of double digits. Decades. Multiple decades. What are we talking about? And then obviously the margins. Margins are 77%. 80% gross margins. And it's all profits. It's all growth and it's all profits. And again, we are about to enter another tech boom. What the heck? But same thing with Salesforce. Salesforce is another 77%, 80% margin. Very solid. I guess the revenue is not as strong. I mean, obviously, again, still decades of double digits until the last couple of years. But the other thing to understand is that Salesforce is quite a bit bigger in terms of total revenue and market cap. But in terms of total revenue, they make a lot more money. So law of large numbers means that you can only grow so much. But really, I mean, that is also why I do think ServiceNow is going to perform better as a company. It's both that revenue thing with the not eating your own tail. That's a really important thing. But it's also that you have a much smaller number, which means you have a lot more room to grow. So as a company, I think ServiceNow is probably going to do better. Better as in terms of growth, right? The difference now, another lesson when it comes to the market is that God, a company can do better as a company, but valuation valuation is another big effect. Valuation is another big thing on the stock performance, the company performance. Like that's one of the big things to understand is that I can buy a worse company at a better valuation and get better stock performance than the good company. Okay? If we're comparing three companies right now, let's compare, if we were to compare Salesforce, ServiceNow, and then Palantir, right? We're looking at three SaaS software companies. The best one on that list, I think, is Palantir. It would be Palantir, ServiceNow, and then Salesforce. But in terms of stock performance, you might actually get a better performance out of Salesforce over the other ones. Stock performance because of the valuation. If you can buy something at a cheap price, the cheaper you can get it, the more gains you're going to get. I mean, obviously, it's a sliding scale, so you have to adjust the numbers. But if you were to adjust it and measure it out, I think you would get a better stock performance on Salesforce. So in terms of valuation, we're looking at a 25 times earnings on Salesforce, which is, I keep saying, you know how significant this is. This is a SaaS company. SaaS companies trade at least 35. 35 is actually cheap for Salesforce. They've been trading 35 because single digit growth. You don't want to see single digits on a SaaS company. But these companies trade at 50 plus, 70, 100. They trade up there. 25 times raw trailing price earnings. that is recession pricing, okay? But then the real kicker is the price of sales. Well, again, 4 times sales on a SaaS company, on a massive successful SaaS company. You don't see this price. You just don't see this price. First of all, you've never seen this price. You've never seen this price. Yeah, just like Adobe, where we haven't seen this price in decades. Well, I don't think we've ever seen a 4 times price of sales for Salesforce. And understand why this is so important is because valuation is so important because granted that all of these, as long as all of these fundamental stories, companies are not being disrupted, as long as they, like, I explained why they're not, but because these companies are not being disrupted, the valuations going back eventually, I'm not saying when, I'm just saying eventually, it's going back to normal, likely better than normal because of AI. It's very likely on Salesforce you're going back to 10 times sales, or at least 7 or 8. So on a sales basis, you're doubling up. On an earnings basis, same deal. If they go back to growth again, their earnings basis, you're going back to 70 to 100. What does that mean? That's a 4x right there. That's a 4x right in the valuation. And obviously it only works if the fundamental keeps on growing, but it is. Compared to why I say Palantir is not a bias, if we look at Palantir, it's priced at 300, which means you only really can come down from here. There is no boom upside that we're looking for. You only get the boom upside if you're lucky. If the market decides to be stupid and then you get lucky. Otherwise, you can, if you're holding at this price, which I have a little bit, if you're holding at this price, you can only hope that Palantir does so magically well that they can catch up to their valuation. That's what you're hoping for. That's not a gain. That's not a gain. That's called holding the current price. If something else happens, recession, they miss earnings, we're getting crushed. We're getting crushed because of the valuation. That's how valuation works. And that's why when we look at ServiceNow, I think it's a better company. I think it's set up better fundamentally. But valuation wise, it's just not as good as Salesforce. They're likely still kind of early stage in their earnings, so maybe this price of earnings just could be lower on a forward basis, but it couldn't be that much lower. It's maybe a 40 times forward price earnings, compared to under 20 for Salesforce. Remember, we're talking about the same kind of company. This one might have a little more growth, but we're talking about the same kind of company here. Like if we're shopping, these are both apples. We're both looking at apples here. So they're about the same kind of apple. Maybe ServiceNow's a bit of a shinier apple. I'm not paying like 3 times the price for a bit of a shinier apple. And then same on the price of sales. Price of sales is 8 times. Price of sales is 8 times sales. It's a lot cheaper than their history. I wish the chart was a little better, but it's a lot cheaper than their history. They trade at, 10, 20, but it's not that much of a discount. It's at 8 times. 8 times. If we can, let's zoom in. But 8 times it's cheaper than usual, but not by that much. Not like, this is not like Adobe and Salesforce. The kind of deals you're getting there, that's a deal. But either way, massive fundamental winners. So that's why Salesforce and ServiceNow, both of them, double buys, and let's move them up, okay? Let's move them up to right about here. Above the data centers for sure, and above Netflix because, again, it's just a temporary shakiness compared to just obvious wins. Obvious wins over here.
I win here and I win there. Now what?
But that's the deal. Thanks so much for watching. Y'all have a good one.